All right, welcome to our explainer. Today, we're going to get into what really made a king powerful in the ancient world. And here's a hint. It might have less to do with armies and gold than you'd think.
Okay, so let's just dive right in with a big question. When you picture an ancient king, what comes to mind? Probably armies, right? Chariots, grand palaces, all that stuff. But what if the real bedrock of their power, the thing that truly made them a king, was something way more personal and way more public?
You know, the biblical story of Absalom's attempted coup? It gives us this perfect clue. See, it wasn't enough for him to roll up with all the military spectacle, the horses, the chariots, the entourage. To really be seen as a king, he had to go to the city gate, where real people brought their problems and be a fair and accessible judge. It shows you there are kind of two faces to power, and one of them, well, it was way more important than the other.
And this leads us straight to the absolute core idea that held up all these ancient monarchies. The thinking was that a king's legitimacy, their right to rule, it wasn't just won on a battlefield. No, it was granted from a much, much higher power.
Yeah, all across the ancient Near East, there was this really powerful belief. You could call it the king as a divine mirror. The idea was that the gods gave a king the authority to rule, and so their number one job, their most sacred duty, was to reflect the gods' own perfect justice right here on earth. So their authority to judge wasn't just political, it was literally seen as divine.
And this idea is just brilliantly illustrated by the famous Code of Hammurabi. I mean, he didn't just write down a bunch of laws and say, "Here are my good ideas." No way. He had them carved on this huge stone monument, a stela, that shows him receiving the laws directly from Shamash, the god of justice. And the code itself says its whole purpose is to protect the weak from the mighty, a job he says was given to him by the gods.
Okay, but here's what's really fascinating. This wasn't just some Babylonian thing. This blueprint for what makes a legitimate ruler, this idea that kingship is justice, you find it all over the place, across totally different empires and cultures.
I mean, just look at this. In the kingdom of Mari, King Zimri-Lim is told he has to be there for any man or woman who cries out for justice. Then you jump over to the Hittite Empire, and the king is telling his people, "You shall do what is just, especially for servants." And in Egypt, the highest official, the vizier, is reminded that God hates it when you play favorites. The message is just, it's the same everywhere. It's so consistent.
So when you step back and look at all these texts, this incredible pattern just jumps out at you. From Babylon to Ugarit and everywhere in between, the real test of a good ruler, the way you knew they were legit, was how they treated the most vulnerable people in their society. We're talking about the widow, the orphan, the poor, the non-resident, all the people who could easily be forgotten.
Okay, so let's shift gears a bit and see how this whole idea plays out in the biblical tradition, in ancient Judea, because it really zeroes in on four specific kings who are held up as the gold standard for this king of justice ideal.
And those four are David, his son Solomon, and then the later kings, Josiah and Jehoshaphat. In the tradition, these guys are the ones who are supposed to perfectly embody this sacred role. They're like the poster children for being a king of justice.
But, and this is where the story gets really fascinating, the very same texts that lift these guys up as these perfect models of justice, they also include these incredibly honest, sometimes shocking details that just completely contradict that perfect image.
I mean, take King David. On the one hand, the text says he exercised justice and equity for all his people. Sounds great, right? But on the other hand, the record is so brutal and unflinching about his abuses of power that some scholars have literally called him a serial killer with a homicidal policy. What a paradox, right?
Then you've got his son Solomon. He's remembered as the ultimate just king. You probably know the famous story where God basically offers him a blank check, anything you want, and he doesn't ask for money or power, he asks for a servant's heart and an understanding mind to provide justice for his people. It's the perfect example of the ideal king.
And yet, you keep reading, and the same narrative shows him breaking all sorts of laws, using these ruthless political schemes to grab the throne, and building up his own wealth and power in ways that flew right in the face of the law of the king, which was literally the set of rules designed to stop kings from doing exactly that.
Fast forward a bit, and King Josiah is held up as another one of these great examples. The prophet Jeremiah has this absolutely incredible thing to say about him. He basically says Josiah was a good king, that he knew God, for one simple reason. He advocated justice for the poor and needy. And then he says, and this is a direct quote from God, "Is not this to know me?" Wow. Justice for the poor is how you know God. And this whole idea might just reach its peak with King Jehoshaphat. Get this. When he sets up a system of judges, he gives them this profound, almost chilling instruction. He tells them, look, it's not on behalf of human beings that you're doing this. You're rendering justice on behalf of Yahweh himself. He's saying that God is literally in the courtroom with you, judging your judgment. Can you imagine?
So let's pull all this together. What's the big takeaway here? What does this consistent and, kind of complicated idea about power and justice from the ancient world really tell us?
Well, the logic was actually pretty straightforward in the ancient mind. Step 1. Justice isn't a human invention. It's a divine attribute. It comes from the gods. Step 2. Kings are chosen to be the gods' representatives on earth. So step 3. A king's actual legitimacy, their right to sit on the throne, is completely tied to how well they do their job of bringing that divine fairness to the people.
So the ultimate point is this. For these ancient peoples, justice wasn't just an accessory to power. It wasn't some nice bonus feature. No, it was the very foundation. It was the operating system, the source code of their power. The whole institution of kingship was built on it. If you failed at justice, you weren't just a bad king. You basically weren't a king at all. And that ancient way of thinking, I think, leaves us with a pretty provocative question for our own time, doesn't it? If the true foundation of power is justice, if the ultimate test of a leader is their commitment to protecting the vulnerable, well, how do we judge our own leaders by that standard today?